If you're looking for a way to chug your big gulp or slam some Doritos down your face hole on the range without setting your gun down or sack tapping yourself in the process, stay tuned because today we're taking a look at some of the best 2-point slings on the market. What is up, guys? My name is John with PewPewTactical.com, your definitive source for gun reviews, gear guides, and all things that go bang. When it comes to rifle slings, there are a dizzying amount of options on the market. However, gone are the days in which 1, 2, and 3-point slings were all treated as equally viable options. While there might obviously be some situations that warrant a caveat to the statement, in our opinion, 2-point slings are essentially the only slings worth owning in the year of our Lord 2019, and for good reason. While single-point slings do make it pretty easy to switch to your weak side, they've also got a pretty glaring tendency to nail you square in the boys whenever you let go of your rifle, and I'm sure I don't need to go into detail on why that's not optimal. Conversely, 3-point slings are way over-engineered for what you probably need a sling to do. Without going into too much detail, in our opinion, they belong in the dumpster right next to those awful snap Velcro pouch attachment systems that you see a lot on cops in shitty 90s action movies. That brings us then to the wondrous mix of simplicity and functionality found in most modern 2-point slings. Most notably, the Viking Tactics and Blue Force Gear Vicker slings that we've got here today, in a couple of different flavors. Modern 2-point slings generally afford you a tremendous amount of flexibility both in weapons manipulation and secure storage in situations where you might need to use both hands unobstructed while keeping your gun on your person. Compared to the 1-point sling, a 2-point generally allows you to quickly toss your rifle out of the way if you need to, say, transition to a sidearm. Both the VTAC and Vickers slings also allow you to adjust the usable length of your sling on the fly, thanks to the similar pull tabs that tighten or loosen the overall amount of slack. As you can imagine, this opens up a pretty good amount of dynamic shooting possibilities, such as keeping the sling tight and rolling the stock up into your shoulder to provide added stability, or slipping one arm out of the sling to transition to a weak side shot without strangling yourself. For size comparison, here are some waffles. Obviously, you've also got the ability to both tighten the rifle to your chest or sling it over the shoulder onto your back if necessary, which is super useful if you ever need to climb or hop over a wall, assuming you are even remotely close to being fit enough to perform either of those actions. And just so that we're clear, we're not trying to misrepresent our street cred whatsoever. We're just gun dorks, and none of us have a MIL or LEO background, so we're not going to go into the weeds about situations in which it might be advantageous to go hands-on in CQB or to administer some sort of medical aid, because that's very firmly outside of our wheelhouse. Obviously, if you're training for those type of specific scenarios, it's reassuring to know that you've got a weapon sling that is versatile enough to keep up. But again, that's not our forte, so we'll let the actual cool guys handle that. All of the slings we tested are QD mount compatible, which means that you've probably got at least one mounting point on your gun to begin with. The QD mount works by simply pressing in the button and firmly driving it into the rifle's mount, giving you a secure attachment point that can be placed on multiple spots throughout your rifle depending on what exact setup you've got. There are a few different schools of thought when it comes to where exactly you attach your sling points, assuming you've got the hardware to move it around and figure out what works best for you. Many modern rail systems already include a QD sling attachment spot somewhere on the rail, but you may want to look into M-LOK or Picatinny hardpoints if you're not satisfied with that fixed setup. The rifle that we've got here has a Magpul RSA QD point on top of the rail itself. We've actually set it a little bit further back than we normally run it, just to make sure that we can manipulate the in-force weapons light that's mounted at the 11 o'clock position on this M-LOK rail. In the back, we've got an MFT Stock that has a built-in QD slot, but in all honesty, this isn't my favorite setup. The sling point being on the bottom of the stock itself leads to some kind of funky moments when you're trying to do transitions or switch to weak side shots, as the stock has a tendency to snag the sling on the bottom of the clubfoot portion. Though we were a bit pressed for time when shooting out in the desert, if I had the opportunity, I would have ditched the rear QD attachment and threaded the sling through the slots provided on the MFT stock, which would have achieved the same result. In terms of differences between the sling variants, there's nothing super huge here. Functionally, the Vicker Sling is a tiny bit more simplistic in that you've only got one pull tab that both extends and contracts the sling length, whereas on the VTAC, this is controlled by a separate pull tab and locking mechanism. Materials-wise, the Vicker Sling features Blue Force Gear's signature thick-as-hell webbing and hardware, and the padded variant is a tiny bit larger than VTAC's. While padded slings aren't entirely necessary in our opinion, they'll definitely help mitigate the sling from digging into your shoulder if you've got to have your gun on you for long periods of time, The VTAC sling is comprised of much lighter weight materials, similar to the webbing you'd find on a plate carrier, and the pull tab is a nice rubberized material. Both Midwest Industries QD attachments are recessed into the sling point itself, and while that's not a problem we've ever encountered, in theory this mitigates the possibility of the sling coming undone when you don't intend it to. Additionally, a common complaint that we see with the VTAC sling is the immense amount of extra material included on the muzzle side of the sling. Ostensibly, this just allows for a huge amount of adjustability depending on your body type if you're a hefty boy, but most folks will probably want to either tape or cut and burn the excess once it's adjusted to where you want it. Additionally, the VTAC includes a Velcro keeper that secures the length of the sling extension and gives you a hard stopping point if necessary, but it can be undone with a bit of force if you need to jump the sling out even further. All in all, we don't necessarily have a clear preference one way or the other between the VTAC and Vickers slings. I know for me personally, I don't really like the thickness of the webbing on Blue Force Gear products, but that is admittedly a pretty nitpicky gripe. If you're in the market for a 2-point sling, we think that both are great options and will do essentially the same job pretty admirably. We'd honestly recommend trying out both and playing with a few different positions on the QD attachment point systems if you're at all able, and we're pretty confident that once you've got it set up to your liking, you'd be happy with either. Alright guys, that's gonna do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel as we've got lots more kit ramblings on the way. Once again, my name is John with Pew Pew Tactical, and we will see you next time. The rifle that we've got here has a Magpul RSA QD point mounted on the top of the rail. Mine just goes completely blank.